to Cultivating Harmony. Today I wanted to speak about something that's really at the heart of Chinese medicine and Taoism, which is about appropriateness and timing. And why we can look at Chinese medicine or Taoism as a guide for understanding how we, as well as the universe, actually function, and not just look at them as a set of fast and hard rules to follow, or of things that we can do or can't do. There are really very few recommendations in Chinese medicine that are very strict and are never-evers, right? And that's kind of the beauty, in my opinion, of these teachings. Because if we understand who and where we are, if we find ourselves out of balance in one direction or another, we are always able to navigate ourselves back to the center. And whether it's more on the topic of nutrition, conduct, or philosophy, Chinese medicine and Taoism provide us with a much more dynamic approach than the typical idea of good versus bad foods, lifestyles, habits, people, etc. In the West, we really get stuck in this framework of duality, good versus evil. But through Chinese medicine and Taoism, we observe that the universe is more of an interplay between these two aspects, and also a cycling between the two of these things. And we can even maybe perhaps say that at the end of the day, neither of these even exist. I find that Westerners really get very obsessive and fanatical on one diet, one superfood, one method of exercise or belief, instead of actually asking ourselves, is this thing really appropriate under all times and circumstances? Or maybe it's just a trend being pushed on us, or maybe there's even a deeper reason we are finding ourselves attached to a certain idea or belief. So when suggestions are given for, let's say, the seasons, it's not that we must do these things and conversely cannot do other things. But if we wish to live in harmony with ourselves and our environment, as well as the universe, these are things that are appropriate to do or to avoid during these times. That doesn't mean that these are fixed rules, and because the universe is constantly cycling and changing, right? We observe this in the cycling and changing of the seasons, for example. We ourselves are constantly cycling and going through changes. And we can describe this as the changing between summer to winter, good and evil, life and death, morning and night. These are just some examples of the cycles that we go through. We are then able to realize that everything has its peak as well as its decline. Everything in nature will eventually go through this process of growth and decay. When we're able to identify different cycles that we're in and the patterns of nature, and remember, we as men and women are part of nature as well, we are then cultivating and living in harmony and flow. There's less resistance and suffering that takes place when we're able to mimic or mirror the cycles that we're involved in, instead of fighting against them. That's why it's said that attachment leads to suffering. If we get too attached to our beliefs, ideas, or preferences, and whether that's to a season, a way of living, conduct, the nature of the universe is to give every single thing, good or bad, its chance at peaking and decaying. The universe wants to give all things, let's say, equal opportunity, right? An equal chance at the experience of it all. And that's really what we are here for. So this means that things are constantly changing and shifting. Nothing ever remains the same. So it's less about good versus bad or absolutes, but more about the appropriate timing of things. So if we can observe which part of the cycles that we're in, we can cultivate more harmony in our lives by mirroring these little shifts in our own lives. And if everything has its time, it's only about, is our conduct or what we're doing, how we're living, the choices we're making appropriate for this point in time. Not that this is a good diet or that's a bad diet, or this is a good type of exercise and this is a bad exercise, right? And for example, this is why in winter, let's say, it's not that it's a bad thing to eat watermelon, it's just not the appropriate food for this season, right? And that's why nature doesn't naturally give this fruit to us right in certain places, because it's not appropriate for that time or place. It's also why we wouldn't wear a winter snowsuit in the middle of a hot summer. It's just not appropriate. We're not attaching the morality to it of it being good or bad. It's just not an appropriate thing to do. It's not in sync with the energies around it. And nature will naturally display to us what is appropriate. But since we as humans, or I prefer to say as men and women, we have the choice of free will, which means we can make decisions which either align with it or are against it, which means we can make the choices then to align with the current energies, or we can try to fight against these natural energies or currents. And what this actually does is by fighting, right, the natural energies, we're using up more of our own natural life force or energy, wasting it by fighting the current, right? It's almost as if we're swimming upstream instead of going with it. And this is why, for example, we see that people who follow Chinese medicine principles or more kind of ancient cultures who were living with more harmony of nature and the seasons and these types of things either lived longer, were overall less stressed and more happy or content. They really brought upon themselves less struggle and suffering. And that's not to say necessarily, right? Like we said, there's no morality attached to it. It's not that going against the current and using up these energies or life force and having a shorter life, being unhappy is actually a bad thing to do. That's just one option we have as beings in this life and body, right? It's one option of how we may conduct ourselves. And this is why using our free will of choice wisely is very important, depending on what your goal is. So if you'd like to learn more about these different cycles that we go through and how things are considered appropriate or not during different stages, make sure you subscribe to my channel and like this video if you found it helpful, as it allows me to continue sharing Chinese medicine, Taoist, as well as metaphysical knowledge and wisdom that I have been fortunate enough to learn and enjoy discussing with you. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.